Hey guys, I'm super excited. Today is our inaugural episode of Mompreneur Mondays, where we are surviving and thriving in business and beyond. I'm really excited to do this series because, mostly due to COVID, we haven't been able to be around our friends. And for me, my support system is my friends, and especially my entrepreneur friends and my mom friends. So to not be able to network on a regular basis, see each other on a regular basis, get together, talk about our wins and our challenges and what we're working on has been really hard. So what I wanted to do is, since we're going into winter with COVID and it's probably going to be pretty much the same as it's been, I wanted to bring this weekly series live and get with some of my great mompreneur friends and talk a little bit about what our journey's been through entrepreneurship and motherhood and what we're working on right now, things that are helping us, tips, tricks, things that will make all of our lives a little easier. And I think this series is going to be amazing for anybody, whether you are not an entrepreneur or not a parent. So many of us are working from home right now. So if you're working from home with kids, there's a lot that you can learn from the rest of the community who maybe has been working from home with kids this whole time. And if you are not an entrepreneur, I said that already. And if you are not a parent, you might be an entrepreneur or might be thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. And that is a journey unto itself. So I'm really, really excited to talk about all of that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my personal journey through entrepreneurship and motherhood. So for me, my entrepreneurship journey started first. I became an entrepreneur in 2012 when I started my business, Glow Social Media. And it wasn't until 2018 that I became a mom. So I really had this kind of clashing of, what does it look like to be a mom and be an entrepreneur? How can all of these things work together? So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and we're going to bring in our guest. So I have Erica Owens from Frugal on the Fly, and I am going to get her. We can't wait to hear from her and get this show on the road. Hello, how
Hey,
are
dear.
you?
Good, good.
Good. It's so good to see you.
It's been a long time.
I was just saying, well, I was just saying that that's kind of the whole point of this is mostly selfishly that like I
Yeah.
miss my friends.
Well, we live
Um,
like 20 minutes apart, but I
right.
haven't seen you in months.
No, and so it's like I haven't seen anybody. So it's just, it's been so crazy and I've just been like living in my little like maternity quarantine bubble. So I think that's kind of added to it a little bit. Um,
Sure.
And it's funny because right before, maybe, I don't know, 15 minutes before 3 o'clock, I was like, man, the baby's sleeping, which normally is a great thing. But when you're about to go live, it's a bad thing because
Yep.
I don't want her to wake up because I'm like, well, you either are going to stay asleep for an hour or you're going to wake up right now. So she actually
Yeah.
woke up right then. So it was like I could get her situated and,
That's
and
funny.
it's good. And as a second child, she's so used to like not being paid attention to that it's like it's fine, no one pays attention to me anyway,
Just take
so
me over here.
all right, I'll just sit in the corner while everyone does their thing. So that's fun. Well, I'm super excited to have you and I
Thanks.
want to introduce you. So this is also going to go up on YouTube, so you'll be able to read Erica's amazing bio, which is like she is one of the most amazing people I know. And I just wanted to read a little bit of this. So Erica Owens is our very first guest for Mompreneur Mondays, and she is the founder of Frugal on the Fly, which she, of course, is going to tell you a little bit about. Philanthropist, humanitarian, activist, mother, and wife. And When I say she is absolutely all of those things, you are just out here like saving the world, and that makes me feel so good just to know you and kind of be in your orbit. Because when I just see the things that you're doing, it's so amazing. So we're gonna jump
Oh,
into
thank
it.
you.
Um, and the rest of your bio, everyone will get to read on YouTube about all of the
Yeah.
awesome things that you're working on. So, what I wanted to do is just kind of have you tell us a little bit about yourself. And I like to start kind of a twofold journey from two places. So, whether you were an entrepreneur first or a mom first, kind of tell us what that was. So, which of those were you first? And then what kind of happened when those two worlds collided? So I was kind of telling everybody that for
Sure.
me, I started my business in 2012 and I didn't have my first child until 2018. So it was like I was cruising and then I hit the brick wall that is the big change of your life where you kind of add a business or a baby to the whole mix. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that for you.
Okay. So I was in corporate world when I was pregnant. So I was flying all month long. I used to work in the knitting industry and the yarn industry. So I was doing trade shows and flying all over the place. And then I ended up having a high risk pregnancy very early on. Like I hadn't even announced I was pregnant yet. And I landed in Arizona. I'm in Detroit, and if no one knows, and I was just enormous, and I was probably 8 weeks along, 9 weeks along, and I called the doctor, and he's like, "This is really abnormal," and I'm like, "I'm terrified to get back on the plane." He's like, "Well, do your best, just like rest easy," and I was like, "I'm about to go into a trade show booth and work 12 hours a day," and it was terrifying, and so it was really tough. I was very ill, and it was kind of that moment where you're like, I don't think I can do this. And that was not the plan. So um, I didn't really know what to do. And then I kept working and I ended up being a VA for a couple of years. So I was working crazy hours, managing household, and my son was very sick for the first 2 or 3 years, like very ill. So it was really hard, and I needed to work. So we kind of didn't have a choice in our household. So but that's what I knew, that's what I did. I had a great job, but I just couldn't pull it off anymore. And when he was 2, I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I started my social media firm so I could choose my clients, choose my own hours, and manage it all and be able to stay home with him and not have daycare because he couldn't go because he was just compromised. So that's how it started in kind of a mad panic. And it worked out. And I did that for several years. Still do.
Yeah, so tell us how Frugal on the Fly came about and tell us a
Yeah,
little bit about what it is, which is so much part of the story, which I know. So kind of tell us
you
that whole
too.
thing.
So almost 3 years ago. So because we just always had a tight budget, and um, I wanted to do all the things, and I have a world traveler background, so I'm always like seeking to explore everything. And so when I had a child, a lot of my friends were like, "What are you going to do? Aren't you going to miss jumping on a plane or going to all the wild trips, crazy countries that you used to do?" And I was like, no, I was like, I'll be okay. And so I just kind of took all that to parenting. And so I would seek out all the things to do in our area, places we hadn't been, museums we hadn't been to, trails we hadn't been to. And I found that there was all kinds of free and cheap resources. So we just did all the things. And so a lot of my friends, I think they didn't really know. They're like, oh, it must be nice to have like an unlimited income or all these things. And I was like, oh gosh, no. I was like, no. I was like, I even grocery shop in like the sales section first and work backwards. I'm like, no, that's not our life. So that was kind of enlightening to me. And they would always text me every week, like, well, what are you doing this weekend? You always seem to know. So this went on for a while. And then almost 3 years ago, I said to my husband, I'm like, why don't I just start something like a hub for parents to find free and cheap things to do? Because there was a lot of parenting sites out there, but they weren't always geared to that part, so I would look at those and I'm like, oh, that's cool, but we can afford it. And so I was always looking for that. So I started that. So it was just like one spot to find all the things.
Love it. So the one thing that kind of brings up for me is we think about our life in terms of, oh, I need to go here to have this experience, or I need to be able to hop on a plane and go to Costa Rica. But what you do with Frugal on the Fly really shows that there's so much in your own backyard.
Hmm.
And I know that you've experienced that just from anecdotes of other people experiencing, the things that you kind of bring to light and opportunities and, fun events is that, wow, I didn't know there was so much to do here.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I talked to a lot of friends that, um, had toddlers, and I'm like, oh, do you guys go to the DIA? And they're like, no, they're kind of little. And I kept getting that response also. And so that helped me with my own business of making people aware that littles belong in museums. Littles need to grow up in museums, and there are ways to fall in love with it year after year for different reasons. And so when they're little, there's lots of, preschool programming. A lot of museums at the front desk have guides for age groups. And so a lot of those things were unknown. And so it
Hmm.
was my mad mission to be like, you got to find this out. Because
Right.
my little guy was growing up in museums. He went from a baby carrier to the stroller to walking. But because of that, he just grew up around whether it was science or art or music, all those different things. And so he kind of led us as he grew of what he wanted to see, what his favorites were. And then we could fall in love all over again, like, oh my gosh, well, now you can read, or maybe colors, or, all those things that we could kind of incorporate into these journeys. And it was really fun.
Right.
And
And
in the DIA for us, Detroit Institute of Arts, for those that don't know around here, it's free for if you live in the Tri-County area. So there's so much to tap into if you start looking around, or museum memberships. Those are a great deal. Sometimes one, you have reciprocal at different ones, or you just save by, biting the bullet in the beginning, but then you get to go all year long, those kinds of things.
so, what would you say is the biggest thing that you've kind of noticed throughout your son's life about your making kind of a conscious choice to do all of this and expose him to, all of these opportunities?
Well, I think I saw the world through his eyes, and that was really exciting for me because a lot of these things I had experienced before, and I didn't notice things, or I was like, oh, that's pretty cool, really cool observation. Or we started getting interested in things that I was never interested in, but I'm like, all right, kind of that outschooling idea of like just, lead with them. And if they're really interested in this, we'll find a way to incorporate, math, science, and art into the trucks or into dinos
Right.
or, all those things. And there's so many roaming exhibits and or music. There's lots of musicians and musical organizations around town that have like free things at libraries that you can get exposed to drumming or different types of music that maybe you didn't grow up with or you don't even like, but then their eyes light up and they're like, oh, this is my thing. So I would say that was the biggest thing that I learned, that it was never too young to expose them to anything, and then I could learn through them about things.
And that's really awesome because I think a lot of the times our default, or you hear a lot of parents saying, oh man, but it's such a hassle, right? That's our immediate kind of reaction is like, oh geez, like I have to pack a lunch and all the things and a change of clothes and and one
Yeah.
thing that I really like about just kind of watching you go through life with your son is you're not afraid to just jump up and go. It's like, yeah, something might happen and he might need a change of clothes and we might not have them, but but you just kind of go with it. And I really
Yeah.
love that spirit. So is
Oh,
that something
thanks.
you felt like you always had, or is that something that you've kind of developed?
I always had that, and I became even more adventurous and spontaneous as I was a parent. Because in order to do all the free and cheap things, you kind of got to go, oh, it's today. I guess we're going there today. Or if
Right.
you really want to do something this weekend, it's like, well, if we throw on the calendar next weekend, we can go to the museum for free. So it was a lot of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I did have that spirit already. So And that's what I point out a lot to parents is like, this is my personality and that's what I brought to parenting. But if you can just take a bit of it, you know, and just maybe try and see how it goes, then you get a little more adventurous, spontaneous by just trying stuff. I mean, I've done it with kids, friends of mine that don't have kids are like, oh, I would have never done this, you know, last minute without planning or, you know, doing all the things. I mean, my car is kind of always packed for an adventure.
Right. And
So,
once you
but
start
you
doing it,
kind
you
of have
kind of
to
know
get
the
in that
things that you're going to
mode.
need. Right. Right.
Right.
You definitely
Yeah.
do.
I mean,
And
it
I
doesn't
will
have to
also
be
say,
totally whimsical all the time.
right. You have it's the behind the scenes planning. So it's kind of like the play
Yeah.
where it's like all the scaffolding is back here. You know, the
Yeah.
car is full of crap that we might need, but then from the front it looks like we're, you
Right.
know, we're ready to go. And I will also say that sometimes going through the experience of like falling short or not having what you need is just enough to make you feel like, oh, I can survive this, you know?
Yeah.
We a couple weekends ago, we decided to go to Pi Sci for the first time, which is in
I saw that.
Detroit.
Yeah.
And my son has a bunch of allergies, so we were like, oh, we're gonna go feed him pizza for the first time. And we were riding around on the way, and my daughter, who's 4 months old, pooped. And I'm like, you need to pull over, you know, it's gonna like come out of her diaper, you know, whatever. So we pull over in like a Subway parking lot, and I get her out to change her diaper. I'm like grabbing all the stuff. I realize we have no wet wipes in her diaper bag. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And so there's nothing we can do. It's not like I can say, let's go home, because it's like she's already like, it's
Yeah.
happened. And so I fish some napkins out of the center console, pour some cold water from my water bottle
Yep.
on it, and I'm like, sorry, baby, like we're having a cold shower today, and you know, made it happen. And I just think that it's one of those things where you just have to go out, and sometimes it's gonna be, you know, you're gonna feel frazzled, but you just do it. And
Yeah.
you either learn to obsessively pack the bag next time, or you say, you know what, we didn't die, so we'll be all right.
And that's it. That's it. I mean, you're going to have disasters. You're going to have nightmares. You're going to be at something 20 minutes and they don't stop screaming. You're like, well, we tried our best, you know?
Yeah.
And you kind of have to take a breath and prepare for that. Or sometimes you don't. And you break down and you cry and you're like, I can't do this. And you pack it all up and you go home. Like,
Right,
I mean, you're going
right.
to have all those moments. And I think as a parent, it's a constant roller coaster like that. But, you know, having that constant fear of like, well, I don't want to go until they're out of all that phase. There's always going to be a new phase of some
Mm-hmm.
sort. And so you can excuse it to death or just say, I'm going to try this. And that
Right.
thing might not be for you. Like the play place joints might not be for you, or the crazy crowded places might not be for you or your kid, you know, but you find all that out by exposing them to it and going, okay, that was not for us.
Right.
Try this,
We'll
or
do
we need
something
small
different.
groups, or we need things that have tickets. Like we can't just wait in line.
Right.
Whatever it may be, like you'll find out as a family, like how you can function and do stuff.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of kind of the frugalful life, which I know is your tagline, what are some of the coolest experiences that you've had either on a whim or someone gifted you? You know, what's something that sticks in you or your family's mind that was just like, wow, how did that happen?
Oh, yeah, there's been a bunch. I will say that, you know, as you put more stuff out there on Instagram, Facebook, people just know that you're always willing to grab the free, that you'll go last minute. So we often get last minute sporting events tickets, and sometimes they're the best seats in the house. They're floor
Yeah.
seats or suites, but they just know, they're like, oh, those crazy kids will take it.
Right,
You know?
they'll go.
And it doesn't go like, or it's going to waste. It's kind of like that thing. And they're just like, gosh, you know, if you would like to. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we'd love to. So that
Mm-hmm.
whole life isn't for everyone, but every once in a while you can do it too. Like just say, yeah, like let's eat dinner early, or we pack it and we eat in the car right before we go. So you don't have to pay a fortune for food, and maybe just get a snack or a water when you're in there. But those are fun. We've taken advantage of Broadway tickets before. So that's like a really cool secret. Patrick really likes plays. He really likes musicals. My son is 8. Not my thing. I love plays. I don't like musicals, but I was like, well, this kid loves everyone breaking into songs, so let's do it. And he was determined to go to Wicked. I don't know why. And this was, I think, a year or two ago. And I was like, I don't know. Well, I find out that 2 hours before you line up and you can try to get into the lottery. So you wait in line with all these people, you put your name in, and then if you go, they're $25 tickets. So it's like
Wow.
a fraction of the cost. But you're there with like 100 people. They pull like 10 names, you know. So I explained all this to him. He was like, I'm willing to try. We'll bring our fancy clothes. We'll put it in the car. Like, let's do this. And I was like, wow, that's like way more adventurous than even I am. I'm like, all right, bud. But I
Right.
kind of put that fire in him, you know, from doing all these crazy adventures. So they don't pull his name. They don't pull my name, or they don't pull my name. That's right. He's a kid. And he was bummed. I hear. And
Baby.
so he was just so bummed. And I'm like, sorry, bud, you know, we can't go. Because they're also sold out. They released those last minute tickets, or they did have tickets, but they weren't together and they were a fortune. I'm like, no, we're not doing it.
Yeah.
So then he says, hey, I noticed a kid won a ticket. And I said, yeah, but she was like in 8th grade. Like she had a middle school ID. And he's like, yeah, she had an ID. He's like, I have a passport. And I was like, you do? And he's like, we're coming again tomorrow. I'm bringing my passport and I'm doing this. And I swear that child will manifest things into existence. We do the whole thing again. It's hours, you know, waiting in line, doing the thing, waiting. They pull his name the second day.
He said, I
we
have
go.
ID. I'm getting in this raffle. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
it was amazing. And we were like 4th row center, like just all the things. It was amazing. Best experience ever. But I mean, sometimes like letting your child lead things is a pretty magical experience.
Absolutely. And if he was willing to go back knowing that what the risks were and that you have to go through this whole thing again,
Yes,
and you know that
yes,
he made that decision and he was going to be fine with it either way. So that's
right.
amazing. That's a really
It
cool
was
story. And I
it
think
was
a
pretty
good
cool.
lesson, especially because the first time around it didn't work. So it's like, oh, this doesn't always just go our
Right.
way.
Right. Like failure is good. It's good
Yeah.
to try something, try really, really hard, and it just doesn't happen. I mean, for him, he tried hard again, but he was willing to get up and try again. And he knew all the ins and outs of it. That's a huge commitment and a lot of
Right.
patience. And then the thought that he might not get it again, but I was
Hmm.
surprised.
That's awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a really good experience all around. So going back to kind of entrepreneur life, and obviously we're all in COVID. There are people who never envisioned or expected or wanted to work from home, especially with their kids around. And we're all kind of thrown into this, which is why I said, you know, this series isn't just about kind of the entrepreneurs out there. It's also really for anybody because we're all thrown into this jumble right now where we're at home and trying to figure it
Hmm.
out. Um, so when you were working from home for yourself, but working from home when your son was prior to school age, what did that kind of look like? How, you know, how did you manage? So for all the people out there who have, you know, kids who are home with them, you know, what does that kind of look like?
It was tough. It was a lot of adjusting. The advice that everyone gave you to be as a parent did not work for me. The whole like sleep when they sleep. I was like, well, I'm gonna get to work.
Right. I think
So
I have a long list.
I mean, it wasn't for me, and it wasn't how we could function, and it wasn't ideal, but you kind of have to figure out what works for you, you know. So thankfully I was a night owl. I worked a lot at night, like after, so I would basically work when he was sleeping. So it was not ideal, but it worked for us. So I'm not a great example of how, but I will say it's a good example of like what people say might work for you might not, and you have to figure out what works for you and stop bucking the system, you know, just like, well, I mean, everybody says it's what you're supposed to do, and yeah, that would be nice, but you got to figure that out. Or you might not have a sleeper at all, and you're like, oh, I'm going to work when they go to sleep, and then 8 hours later they're still crying on the half
Right.
hour, and you're like, I have a
This is not
deadline, you know.
right.
So it's rough, it's hard, it's a lot of work, but I wouldn't trade it because at the time, like we didn't want to put him in daycare, health reasons, he couldn't do it. So we figured it out. So my husband
Right.
had a job that was very strict hours. So there was no flex there. So I had to be the flex one, and we all figured it out. And there were times where I'm like, I need you home. You got to figure it out.
Right.
Or
911.
it's you and him. I don't care what happens. Like, I got to do this. So, yeah, it was tough. It was rough. There was a lot of change, and you have to be willing to change, because what works for 3 to 6 months will not work anymore. So they have phases, and so do you. You have work phases that you have to, you ramp up this way, and then they have phases where they're not sleeping, or they're not eating, or they're sick, or they're colicky, or so it's a constant change, constant pivot, and you kind of have to be aware of the ugly stuff for it to work, and not be like, I'm gonna do this, it'd be great, and daycare will work out. Well, sometimes when you're ready for daycare, they're all on wait lists.
Right. Yes.
Or COVID happens and no one's going anywhere, and so you're just like,
Exactly.
well, here we are. And so you just kind of have to figure it out. You have to get really good with activities that they love, that are stimulating, and sometimes you also have to take a breath and realize they're going to have extra screen time that day, and it's just what we got to do as a family.
Right. And I think right now with COVID, that is something that so many parents felt so much guilt about. And now a lot of parents are even feeling more guilt, because all summer it's like, well, they did whatever they wanted on the screen, but now they're forced to sit in front of the screen for school all day. So what I thought I felt guilty about, I now basically have to force them to do. And it's just, the cycle kind of keeps going. I'll also say, with your comment about if you try something and 3 to 6 months later, you might have to change. I was able, a couple months ago this was before the gyms opened back up here in Michigan. So I wasn't really having to get up early in the morning, because normally I get up and go to the gym, but the gyms were closed. So I decided to stay up late and, do some work at night. But now that I want to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to the gym, staying up until midnight working is not sustainable. So I've said, you know what, this little season in my life, I'm going to go to bed early, get up early, go to the gym, figure the work stuff out during the day, and then maybe in another 3 months, I'll do another shift. So you definitely do have to be open, and you can't just say, okay, this whole year, this is how it's going to go, because it's not. It's
well,
really
you
not.
just have to go through so much thing. You might have, a sick parent. Your spouse might lose their job. Like, no, you're going to work, all those things. And so I think it's, really important to set a small schedule and goal. Like, this is what we're going to do for the next 30 days. If it works, we'll try another 30. If it doesn't, we're going to have to change the whole thing.
Exactly. So getting into kind of COVID and what has happened to us over this past year, really, tell us a little bit about kind of what was going on in your life the first couple months of the year, what even your plans were, because I think we all had these great plans and ideas for the year, and what kind of happened when COVID hit, and how you've adjusted your business, your home life, all that.
Yeah, it was strange at first, because I'm also a partner in a digital agency, so I have that going as well. And so I was just at the point in my life where I had the entrepreneur life, but just the last year I was going to an office because I had a kid in first grade, so I could go in after he went to school and then leave in time to pick him up. And it was flex, because I had, lots of other commitments to do outside of just being in that office, sales and stuff. And that was a surprise, because we had just gotten into like, wow, he's older. Like, he can actually make a sandwich. Like, this is so amazing. Like, he's going to go to school and just be there, and I'm going to do this. And it was awesome. And then it was just like, again, the plug is pulled, and you're like, okay, so he's home all the time. I've ramped business up like crazy with my own life and, all of these things, and doing events and all the stuff. And now it's like, okay, we're all home. So it was tough. I moved my entire office home and to my living room, and it was rough. It was really rough. And hard, and it was hard on him. But we just had a lot of conversations, I will say. Like, we just talked a lot about, like, there is nothing we can do about this situation other than embrace it and figure out how we're going to function together. And that was good. It was healthy.
Right.
And that's how we got through it. And then, he'd burst into tears some days, I'd burst into tears some days. But we just really, I let him be open to talk about it. And he would just be mad and be like, I miss Nana and Papa, and I miss my friends. And I was like, I do too. And he was like, oh, okay.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, you can be mad and angry and sad. It's fine, and let it out, and maybe we can schedule something. So we got really creative. Like, we figured out how to play Uno on FaceTime, and I'd make Lego dates with his buddies. We just really tried our best to figure out how to give him social interaction. He's an only child, so that, added a bit of fun for him, because it was just like, it's me and you, bud. Like, and my husband ended up being essential, so he was working more than he ever worked. And, so we were just like this little duo, and I was like, we'll figure this out, I promise. But we did a lot of outside time. We did.
Yeah.
That was the only thing that kept both of our sanities. I'd set a timer and be like, all right, out, we'd go for a walk or do something, because I think that was the way we only both stayed sane.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so this will kind of lead me into what the things that you're working on now. So tell us a little bit about how, COVID coupled with, the social unrest and all of the things that we have basically just had to sit and watch, and many people watching for the first time, realizing that, like, there are huge minorities of people in this country that are treated very differently than everyone else, and how COVID kind of not only exacerbated it, but basically quieted everything else to give a lot of people who didn't know anything about what was going on a window into the lives of people who don't look anything like them. What did that kind of mean for you and your family? And then tell us a little bit about, what you guys have been doing.
Okay. As far as activism?
Yeah.
Okay. We have always been an active family for social justice. I was that person, and I wasn't going to change when I had a child. So I made sure that his, library was diverse. His, things we did were diverse. When injustices were happening, we would talk about it as a family, whether it was in our town or in the nation. So we pretty much have a very open dialogue. And he would see me go off to different things with posters in my hand. And so at a younger age, he started requesting, like, I would like to go. And I was like, oh, I did, your kids are watching, but you're just thinking, like, well, that for me, that was the first time I could say to myself, well, maybe in a little bit. And he was like, no, I want to go. And I was like, you're right. You want to go? We'll figure out a way that this will work. And so we did a lot of protesting, because he just, there's a fire in him that won't quiet. And so he has to be at all the things.
Yeah.
And so we definitely made our voices loud and made sure we were heard. And so we did a lot of protesting. I did some panel work and different interviews and things to just say that you should be having these conversations at the dinner table with your children, that this is not something that they should be excluded from. It happens in their friend base, it happens in their families, it happens in their schools. And so they need to have these conversations, and they are very willing to fight at a young age. So,
yeah. Did you have any friends, either directly or indirectly, say anything about you bringing your son along or involving your son in, the activism that he clearly wanted to be a part of?
Absolutely. I had a group that was like, way to go. And you actually inspired me to have these conversations with my own child or try it with my own child. And then I had conversations of like, what are you doing? Like, you're exposing him to things that he shouldn't be seeing. And I was like, the thing is like, he is fully aware of this. Like, your child leaves your house every morning and has a whole world of his own before he comes home. So there are tons of conversations that we would have, or questions he would have, or, you know, whether it was name calling or being treated unfair or whatever it was, like, he had those questions. And he, you know, studied activists all his life. I mean, partly because that was in his library, but we would talk about that, and that we would talk about that there was a lot of kids like Ruby Bridges that made change at a very young age. You know, there's capability for that. You don't have to be an adult. And so we just did it.
I love it. And I love the example that he's setting, you know, because then other young people kind of get to see somebody out there, you know, who's small and mighty like them, doing their thing.
Yeah.
So I love that. I absolutely love that.
And I sometimes think that they're heard more than we are.
Yeah, because people see that, and, you know, it's like, wow, if this kid is noticing and saying something is amiss here, guys, then it's definitely worth listening to.
Well, yeah, I mean, they can be a disruption for the norm, and they can easily be a catalyst for change.
Absolutely.
Because it's like, there's this little 8-year-old over there, like, things are coming out of his mouth. They're like, what he's saying, he's like, wow, like, good point.
I love it. I love that. Good for you. So you've been working on something lately. So tell everybody a little bit about, you actually just posted, you know, kind of the quick progression I saw on your Facebook about, you know, what started as a little project that you and your son kind of decided that you were going to do to help out people in the community, and kind of what it's turned into. So I'd really love just to hear and tell everybody who's watching what your son's thought process was, and, you know, how you guys came about the work that you're doing right now.
Sure. It was early June where I heard through the grapevine that there were going to be food coming from the USDA, that this large organization in town, Food Rescue Detroit, had gotten the capability for this grant money to feed people that were food insecure in the area. And they work with tons of organizations, but this was kind of oh my gosh, we got this really quick. And we already work with a ton of organizations, but we still have some food left if other organizations want to jump on board. And so my husband had heard this conversation, handed me the information. He was like, you just seem to know people. So, you know, can you think of somebody or call this woman? And like, she's really looking for other organizations for families in need. And I'm like, oh, sure. So we have a conversation. It was June 4th. It was a Thursday night. And, you know, I was involved in different organizations. I sat on some boards, and I was like, yeah, I was kind of thinking of offering up any of those organizations. And the more we talked, the more this whole thing aligned with what I do, that I want things to be accessible and affordable. And I've kept saying to my friends that when all these food distributions were happening during COVID, they were at very large organizations. And I thought, I wonder how people like that aren't on social media or don't just know where to get the access. They don't have a car to get to these big drops and drive it home and all that. How do they get the food? Like, how does this happen? And I said that to her, and she said, oh my gosh, this has been the thing I've been striving for, is I want more grassroots, smaller organizations that pop up in neighborhoods and do the work. And I said, yeah, I couldn't agree more, because I keep wondering about this. Like, how are we reaching enough people that need the food? So she says, yeah, you know, what is the organization? And normally I would not, for some reason, stand in the forefront of my own business. And so I was thinking of the whole time, like, oh, I could call them. And then she asked me, she's like, okay, so if you want to, it starts tomorrow. So it started tomorrow morning. It was the next day. And she's like, well, what is your organization? And I just blurted out Frugal on the Fly. And I don't know what made me do it. Like, I have some thoughts on that, but that's for another conversation. But she's like, oh, okay. And because I'm thinking, oh, I'm not a nonprofit. Like, I don't have any experience. I don't know what I'm doing. So I knew she was looking for, I didn't know what she was looking for, honestly, but I just knew I wasn't it, you know? And she says, oh, okay. And she wrote it down. She said, see you in the morning. And I'm like, holy cow, I'm doing this thing. So I committed to 25 free produce boxes. So they were fresh fruits and vegetables, which was really nice. No canned, no processed, just fresh farm food. How awesome. So I call around to everyone I know, like, who needs this? Who needs this?
Right,
And
now I have
everyone's
to
like,
get
it's
rid of this
tomorrow,
food.
like kind of short notice. And no one, no one. It's now 10 p.m. and I'm freaking out. And all of a sudden I thought, oh, I know a mom in Hamtramck. So I had just exhausted all town resources from many, many towns. Because it was night, I couldn't call everyone I knew, but certain people I had their cell phone numbers. So I call him and he says, oh, there's such a need in Hamtramck. This would be awesome. And I was like, where could I set up? What could I do? And he's like, oh, well, you can just set up in Hamtramck Town Center. No big deal. And I was like, well, I don't have a permit. Like, how many? He's like, just tell him if anyone hassles you, tell him I said it was okay. And I'm like, okay. So I get all this and I was like, well, what if I have leftover? He's like, well, I have a covered porch because it's so hot. He said, you know, I'll tell my neighbors, we'll figure it out. And I said, I'll have more time next week to promote and talk to people and stuff, but this is kind of a hurried thing. So I was stressing over these 25 boxes. So I do a Facebook event and I just cross my fingers and hope for the best. So I pick up the food at TCF Center in Detroit, drive it to Hamtramck with my son, and we're so excited to do this together. And we just drive in this parking lot and it's a huge plaza parking lot. And I'm like, how are they going to find us? What are we going to do? And Patrick's like, let's make signs. He's like, you always have Sharpies. So we like tear off some cardboard and we make signs and I have duct tape in my car and we tape it to the side of the car. I mean, this is just like so strange. We pop open the back of the minivan and it's like, hopefully people find us. Then the line starts coming. And we get rid of it all in like 20 minutes. And I'm freaking out because now I'm turning people away. I don't have enough food. And I'm just like, oh, bud, this is so sad. But I'm like, this is it. And he's like, it's not it. Call them back and ask them for more food. And I said, I can't. Like, we all signed up for numbers. It's all allotted. Like, it's a thing. It's a whole spreadsheet. Like, there's no more food. You know, everyone's figured out. He's like, call the lady. And I looked at him and I was like, oh, okay. He wouldn't let it go. I call him. Yeah. She goes, yeah, there was an organization that could come back. And then it would have been 45 minutes. So I told everyone in line, just wait. Can you wait 45 minutes? And they're like, right. Sure. He's like, they'll wait. If they really want it, they'll wait. We'll go get the food. So we drive back, load up, drive back. Sure enough, they wait. We run out again in 20 minutes. And I was like, I think this might work. Mm-hmm. So I doubled it. So that was June 5th. So I kept doubling it. So long story short, lots of organizations heard about it, partnered with me. And this past 2 weeks ago, we fed 3,900 families.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's so amazing.
It's crazy. And then last week was the first time ever that I didn't drive to TCF anymore because it had grown so much. Food Rescue Detroit really, really worked hard. And they had 2 semi-loads delivered to my location. So, I mean, it was just wild how it grew from, oh my gosh, I don't think I'm going to get rid of 25 boxes. Right. And we've never had leftover. We get rid of it. I don't have any rules in my line, so it's no questions asked, and I allow people, and this is how I think it grew, I allow people to pick up for their neighbors or people that can't get there, because it dawned on me in week 3, like, what if people don't know about this? So right. They were so excited, and they would cry and tell me next week, like, I'm just, like, I have no extra money, but I really have a kind heart, but I have no money to give or be nice to anyone. They're like, you've empowered me to, like, help my community and help my neighbors. And like, now I know them and like, we all work together. And so it's just grown and grown and grown. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's so amazing. And like you said, one of the biggest things I see in just what I've noticed about a lot of the pickups, especially during COVID, is you do have to sign up and you can't, get more than is what allotted. And to your point, there are people who can't get out. And if they can't get out, even if it's down the street, if they can't get down the street, that's it. So right. To be able to empower the community also to not just come get, but also say, hey, I can give back in this way. I can also get my neighbor's food. And that just, I think, makes everybody feel so great. I love that so much.
And there was a lot of, awareness I found out through all this too is that a lot of big organizations that give out free food, you cannot get it if you're a senior or a single person because you don't have children. So you're
Right.
excluded from a lot of lines. So you actually are in line and then find out that, oh, well, no, I'm just me. And they're like, oh, no, it's just for families. And that's like, oh, that's so hard. And so once the word got out for that too, like I just have so many seniors that come up and say, thank you. Like I can't get this food and we are really struggling. And so it's nice to, as I found out, do your own thing.
Right. It is.
Not be
It
under
is.
umbrella of anything else. No 10-person decision makers. It's like, nope, that's what we're doing. Next week,
Right.
nope, new rules.
Right. New rules. I love it. So speaking of new rules, school is a thing, and apparently they tell us our children have to go. So what
Yes.
have you decided to do for schooling this year?
So he is a Detroit school, but they are virtual the first semester. So he is doing virtual school on a Chromebook, and he is really thriving. So he is really enjoying it. He really, really likes his teacher. He likes how it's set up that, it's fairly intimate. They have the in-person class they go to, then they have an assignment. Then they go back and have another in-person session. And then Fridays is called Fun Fridays, so they can choose a multiple, there might be yoga or Shakespeare or different things that they can choose from. And their school is really big on community work and activism. So he's exempt from Fridays because we do this produce, and exempt from the traditional class and we're doing this through the end of October. And they were just so excited. And I said, yeah, and it's not like I'm dragging it to it. Like the two of us started it. And he's the reason it grew. Like we talked to the teacher about that. I'm like, that, you need to be aware of that was kind of neat. And that was kind of cool too. Like some of his friends that were younger came and helped, because as a young person, you are excluded from a lot of volunteer work because you're not old enough. So I think that was like, wow, if you can, pull tape and push stuff around, I was like,
Right.
you can come.
Make a
So that was
sign.
fun
You
too.
can make a
Yeah,
sign.
you
It's
can make
good.
a sign or, ask people how many families they want to help, whatever. I mean, he would talk to people in the cars and I would lift the boxes in, kind of thing. So, so that's been good. And he's been excited to tell his class about that and that's worked into his school. But for us, it's working. Is it, ideal? No. He misses that interaction with kids.
Yeah.
He doesn't play with other kids. He doesn't see other kids other than on a screen.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe if we see some at the playground, but then I'm like 6 feet, and so
Right. I know.
there's social distance.
And they're
So he
just like,
sees them,
they
but he
just
doesn't
want to
really
see
play
someone
with
so
them.
bad. They're like, can I just
know.
hug? Like, you cannot hug.
I know, and you just, as an adult, I think we forget like how much they need all that interaction and playing together and sharing toys and doing stuff together. So it's hard, but we're doing our best.
Yeah, I think it's all made us really aware of just those little interactions that you kind of take for granted as a person, as a parent, that kind of thing. So, one more thing I wanted to kind of touch on with COVID is how have you pivoted your business, if at all, due to COVID specifically?
I will say that the produce was one of the bigger things. I mean, that would have never been on my radar. I would have been doing what I was doing before. And this bubbled up because there was a need in the community. And I think I was willing to see that and listen to that and go, like, how could I help? How could I do this? And so I think for most of us, we're able to survive during all of this with business is by looking around and saying, okay, I can't really do what I was doing before, or maybe I can, but I can incorporate something else. Or, I've had friends that completely changed their whole business but they were willing to do it. And so they're doing okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I think you kind of have to think outside of what you're doing already, or think outside yourself and be like, how could I do this? How could I function?
And for those out there who possibly have, a corporate job that until who knows when, and a lot of people are remote till the end of the year or something like that.
Yeah.
And maybe they're thinking, wow, maybe it's a good time to start my side hustle because I don't have to be anywhere. And yeah, it's going to be more work. But what would you say to those people? Should they go for it? What should they think about if they're going to go out on that limb?
I would say two things. One, I would say give yourself grace, because a lot of information is coming at us right now from other entrepreneurs and coaches and things of like, now's the time, now's the time. Well, not everyone is functioning well during this time. And so, I mean, it's a day-to-day struggle to work from home, not have any coworkers, be self-motivated, not punch a clock, I'll do all those things, function at home, not, maybe you're a really social person and you're not seeing all the people or doing all the things or doing all the events or being a speaker at things. This is hard. This is really hard. So I think it gives us more guilt and anxiety to be like, well, then do something different. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't even, I can barely brush my teeth. So I think on the one side, like it all doesn't have to be done. And so, just start writing down maybe things you want to do or can do. And on the other side, we do really have an opportunity. We have cut out commuting. We have cut out endless cocktail parties and events and different things we might have to go to. So there is more time in the day. I found that myself. There was a lot of other things I could do, and I did. And so if that works for you, then that, it is the time to entertain something, or just start small and start something, maybe get your logo done, maybe talk to someone about a website, all those things that have to be done anyway. Grab your name. Like maybe haven't even, you've always wanted to start a business that's this name. Well, have you even researched it's available on all the social channels, and your domain name's available, all those kinds of things, because you can grab all that stuff for minimal cost and effort and just sit on it. But if you completely sit, then someone will come by and grab it. So
Right.
You could do minimal baby steps in that kind of way and then just see where it could lead. But thankfully right now a lot of us are wanting to start things or do things. So start talking to your friends about what you want to do, because there's a lot of great networking amongst friends right now that are lifting each other up to be like, yeah, I got to get out of this corporate whatever I'm doing, or
Right.
I'm not making enough money, or I don't want to work all these hours and this is what I make. I think I can do something different and work less and make more, so have all those conversations with your friends. Like if we don't talk to each other about it, like we won't get through this, and you can't do everything alone.
No, absolutely
no way
not.
near did I do all this stuff on my own with all my own ideas and, with no help.
Right. And there is so much to say for, the power of community and just having your people and your tribe and bouncing ideas off. And, we haven't had a lot of that this whole year, which has been really insane.
Yeah.
And on the last topic of kind of giving yourself grace, what were some of the things that you did to just kind of take care of yourself and your mental health throughout all of this? I know one thing that I've said is I am energized by being around people. So being at home for 8 months has been just, when it was really on lockdown, it gets to a low place because you're just like, ugh, when will, what's on the other side of this? So what are some of the things that you did? Because I think, we're still in this and we still need to work on our self-care, and it might not look like the way it used to be, where self-care might have been, hanging out with your friends every so often or going to get your hair done or your nails done or whatever. And there's not as much of that as there was. So what are some of the things that you can kind of do at home with yourself that you have found bring you kind of a little bit of relief mentally?
Sure. One of the lifesavers I had during the first couple months of COVID, like when we all weren't really working. Remember the first couple months where it was just like, oh my gosh, it's all over. And then slowly some went back to work or their business figured it out or, but those first couple months, there was just endless opportunities to do things. And not that we all wanted to, but I found a group. It was a small group and it was a happy hour and it was Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock. And it wasn't always drinking. It was literally a check-in. So, sometimes people have a beer, sometimes they wouldn't, some didn't even drink, but it was more of just like, how's everyone doing? So we would talk, there was a topic every day. So there was a question that we all had to answer and we all just went around and it was like this crazy support group that you landed in by accident. And we all became really good friends and it was really cool because I looked forward to it. I had something to do. It was just an hour. Sometimes you'd stay on longer, but it really helped a lot. And that was good for me to kind of survive through this or complain about things or talk about good things that happened. And I will say I forced myself to get outside because every time I did, I felt better. But some days it's like, I just,
I know.
it was raining and it was just like, oh, it was so rainy in the beginning. But we just threw on raincoats and rubber boots. And I was like, we just got to get out of here, out of these walls.
Yes.
And it was tough. And the really tough thing we did was really looked inside ourselves and decided as a family that we did not like where we lived. So we moved. And that was a really, really, really big change. But it was a lot of conversation of like, if this is our new normal, I'm going to work from home. You're going to go to school in this bedroom or living room. Is this where we want to be all the time? And no one did. And so we moved towns, we moved lifestyles. Like we went from a house to a high rise and that everyone thought we probably had lost our minds. But now that we're here, everyone's like, oh, I get it. This is absolutely you. It's the first place that I've ever lived. That everyone's like, this is all you. Your whole family, not just me, just like, this is how you function, this is how you live, and this makes sense. And I will say that mentally gave all of us like, this place has so much daylight and, so many windows and, it's just all those things really, we have plants again. I haven't had house plants in years, just all these things that you kind of forget that you loved as a person. I think we had to make a list and go back to that of like, what do we want to do and how do we want to live? And so that was a big change and a big jump, but it had to happen.
Right. And I commend you for your courage because that's a scary thing to do. And I think a lot of people feel the way you do, but fear of the unknown is a powerful thing sometimes. So I think it's amazing. And I love that you share your story because there are people out there who just need to hear somebody else, did it and survived and can say, I'm willing to take that jump too. Well, thank you so much. This was amazing. It was so good catching up with you. So glad to share, your story and all of the great things that you're working on. So tell us what you have upcoming, links to websites, everything will be on YouTube in the notes, your social channels, all the things.
Well, I'm frugal on the fly and everything, so it's super easy to find me there. On Frugal on the Fly's Facebook page, on the events tab is where all the free produce, and now it's free food. So I have added, I used to do just free produce, but now it's meat, milk, produce, and then sometimes other dairy items and other farm things that I rescue. So that is every Friday, 8 to 11:30 a.m. in Hamtramck on the corner of Holbrook and Joseph Campa. So the event tab is there. I always need volunteers. It would be amazing. You can show up. I'm very loose. So it's like, if you want to like come at 9, come at 10, come an hour before you work, whatever, it works for me. And so some people stay the whole time, whatever. So please share that Facebook event page wide to all your friends and family because you just don't know who you're going to reach. So it's like, oh my gosh, I do need food. I need this. So, and if you know a family in need that can't get out, please come by. You don't have to explain it to me. Just tell me how many boxes you need, and we'll put it in your car. It's contact free. It's a drive-through. You just drive up, throw it in. And then I'm going to announce it today. It's already been announced nationally, but I'm going to announce it personally. But I am part of Warm the Line, so I am accepting hats, mittens, scarves, masks for everyone waiting in line to vote.
Perfect.
So I'm the one in Michigan that you can mail them to you. So I can give you my business address, or you can just find that on all the social channels. But
awesome.
the
Yeah, we'll
packages
get
are
that
starting to
info
come
out
in,
there.
which is
Perfect.
great. I
That's
know.
awesome.
Yeah, so
Well,
I'm
thanks so
excited.
much.
So
We have 5 seconds left. It's going to come